Welcome to Sex Talk with Kelly, where I invite you to spend the next 30 minutes embracing your sexuality and exploring your edges. Today we are going to reboot your sex life. We're talking about sex and technology, the sexual motivation cycle, and tips for expanding your sexual repertoire. It's going to be a hot show today. We are lucky to have Dr. Stephen DeWitt here with us today to talk about sex and technology. He's been called the Tony Robbins of sex, and he has a doctorate of human sexuality, and he's a board-certified clinical sexologist. Thanks so much for being here.
Yeah, I'm excited to be here. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, I'm excited to talk about this topic. We're surrounded by technology these days, so of course it's going to impact people's sex lives. So what information do you have for us?
Well, it's such a fascinating thing, and it's I really like to say it's like we're witnessing like the evolution of our sexual history and it changing like that. So the combination of sex and technology has always been there. Sex, and specifically pornography, has always been a driver of visual media. So if we look at going way back in the day, I mean, you and I will probably remember, maybe some of your viewers won't, but there was like the VHS, right? And the camcorder, like the one that we held here on our shoulder, right? Rather than like our phones.
Right.
And that was really driven by porn. Betamax, up until that point, was predominantly the video format that people used, but pornographers were like, hey, we want this. And it's easier, and that actually drove and that had people adopt it on mass scale. Then if we fast forward a little bit, we look at DVDs. DVDs were driven by the ability to be able to fast forward and pause instantaneously to your favorite scenes. That again was driven by sex. That was driven by porn. Then if we look at where we are with pay-per-view or satellite movie channels, that was driven by, again, back in the day, at hotels, and they would have porn offered through paying premiums. So all of this technology and sex has always been a driver together. And then, you know, with the internet and now with apps, things are moving faster than, you know, I can keep track of. Each day there's new things coming up, and I think it's fabulous.
Yeah, there's a lot of benefits to it, right? But there are also some negative side effects to it as well.
Yeah, it's always that question. People are on two sides of the fence. Is it about connection? So, hey, if we were dating and you were halfway across the world, guess what? We can use technology to send messages, send vibrations to each other, send all sorts of things to each other. But, and so that's okay. But listen, if I'm by myself and I don't have a partner, and I still use technology, and it's virtual reality porn that I'm involved with. People say, oh, well, is that, you know, disassociation? Am I losing that connection with my potential partner or my partner because I'm in this virtual reality world and enjoying it?
Right.
And you know, I'm of two minds in this. If we as a society, in my opinion, are moving towards a place where people want pleasure, people want fun, people want to enjoy themselves. And if that's going to be the form of, you know, virtual reality porn, and I'm going to enjoy that by myself, so be it.
Yeah.
And who am I to say that you shouldn't do it?
Right.
And I don't think, you know, people who are like, what is the big fear? We're going to stop having sex, and then we're not going to procreate, and then we're not going to have babies, and the population of the world is going to plummet? I don't think so.
Okay.
You know, it's people are interested, they're curious about technology. We have it in the palm of our hands, and it's fun, it's easy, it's sexy. And listen, again, if it works for you, and it worked for your partner, it's consensual, you know, just enjoy it, have fun with it.
Yeah, and I think you're hitting on a good point there. If it works for you and it's consensual, right? So when you're establishing new relationships with people, partners, relationship configurations of all kinds, it's really important to establish what your boundaries are, right? To keep you safe. And if that's included within those boundaries, then go for it, right? But if it's not, then that needs to be a conversation to be had.
Exactly, and it's always about communication. Some of the most common things in my private practice, you know, come up is, you know, well, my partner watches porn, and I think that's bad, or I don't want them to do that, or they should only want to have sex with me, right? And again, I mean, there's a number of different ways we can look at that, but again, you know, the primary relationship that we have is the one we have with ourselves, and their fantasy life, that's always there. And being able to negotiate and create what works for you inside that partnership is really important.
Yeah. It's not a one-size-fits-all. It's really about the people involved in that intimate relationship. Yeah. But sex and technology, it's a fascinating topic, and to learn more, where can people find you?
So they can find me through my website, which is drdewitt.com, and I'm all over social media. And if you're ever in Toronto, you know, come, let's have a coffee. I love meeting people. I love talking about sex. Absolutely.
Yeah, and he's this author of this great book. Tell us about it.
So this is called The Sexual Freedom System, Winning the Inner Game of Sex. So it's based on the premise that the most important sexual relationship that you're ever going to have with yourself, or ever have in your life, excuse me, is with yourself.
Right.
So there's a 4-step process that I work with people, and it takes sex from a social construct, right? So adhering to the standards, ideals, norms, and expectations, brings it down to a personal construct, like really what works for you. And then the next step is a partner construct. How do you create and how do you communicate that with the person or the people in your life that you want to connect with sexually?
Yeah, no, it's a great book. I've read it. It's awesome.
Thank you.
And he's offered to give one free giveaway, so please check out the Sexology International Instagram account.
Cool.
Okay, thanks so much for being here, and stay tuned. We'll be right back with more.
Brought to you by the Inn of Waterloo and Conference Center. Regarded as one of the finest hotels in Kitchener-Waterloo, the newly renovated Inn of Waterloo and Conference Center is committed to making each guest stay comfortable and relaxing. Check us out online for more information.
Two full-time moms on a mission to talk about everything parents deal with on a daily basis.
Okay, so what do you do when your child has a meltdown? It's Vanessa and Melissa, Tuesdays at 7:30 on Rogers TV.
It's closing time, and you stayed out longer than you planned. So now you can't drive, and the buses have stopped running. You could always call your girlfriend. Or maybe your roommate? What about your best friend? You could just dial 1-888-TAXI-GUY or use the Taxi Guy app. The call and the app are free, and they both connect you to a local cab company to bring you home safely. Visit arrivealive.org to find out more. Arrive Alive, drive sober.
Join me on Wednesdays for Lions TV Bingo at 8 p.m. Lots of fun, trivia, and much, much more on Rogers TV.
The following program contains a topic which may not be suitable for young viewers. Viewer discretion is advised.
I always love talking about sex with my Sexology International business partner, Joanne Flannery. She works in an elite private practice in Chicago, who's a sexologist and marriage and family therapist. Thanks for being here, Jo.
Yeah, it's my pleasure.
So we're going to be talking about expanding your sexual repertoire and the sexual motivation cycle. So we'll start with this, how to expand your sexual repertoire.
Okay.
So often we see clients in our practice where we see them where sexual boredom can lead to an aversion. So if you see these clients in your practice, how do you support them through that?
So what I want to know first is, what is the sex that they're having, or what is the sex that they're talking about having? And a lot of times it's a very specific type of, we both climax at the same time, or there are really high expectations for the sex act. And it's not something that both of the partners are up for. Maybe it's one of the partners more of a fantasy or more of their ideal, and the other partner's just not interested. And so I want to talk to people about what kind of sex do they want to have. And when it's a couple, when there's two people in the relationship, I want to know where both people stand sexually, because usually one person seems bigger sexually, like they have more ideas, they're having the sex that this person wants to have. And I want to know what kind of sex does the other person want to have.
Right, because there's obviously two people in that type of relationship, and so their wants and needs could be different. And so playing it safe and just kind of going through the motions of their standard sexual scripts has led them to become a little bit bored and not feeling sexually fulfilled. So you're wanting to break it down by saying, what kinds of sex are you having, and what kinds of sex do you want to be having that makes it more enticing for you.
That's right. And I want to help people break out of the box that they're in. And so we only have sex in our bedroom. But you go out and you have fun at dinner and you have fun at a bar. And so when you're feeling sexual with your partner and you're feeling engaged, maybe you don't have to wait until you get home. Maybe you can go to the car and just kiss for a while. You know, there's a lot of other types of sex you can have that's not just plain old-fashioned intercourse.
That's an amazing point, right? Because I think even earlier we were talking about goal-oriented sex, and it's like, well, if I can't have sex exactly the way I want it, or we can't have sex in a car, or we can't have sex in a restaurant, but you can be intimate and have sexual intimacy in those places that might not involve sexual intercourse, but a lot of kissing, teasing, playing, biting, like there's a ton of opportunity. There
is, and I think you just touched on a great point, the sexual intimacy. So it's inviting that sexual intimacy or that sexual dynamic back into the relationship, opposed to this is how we do it, this is where we do it. There's more of a fluid flow of energy, and there's more of a sexual dynamic between the people.
So how do you bridge that? Let's say one client's on one end of the spectrum, other clients on the other. How can we get creative in supporting this couple who both want a thriving sex life?
That's a great question. Oftentimes it starts with conversation. It starts with talking to each other and finding out what the other person likes, what the other person wants. I talk to my clients about intimate communication, how to communicate during sex. Although I think that sexual acts, if it's going to be something outside of the norm, should be discussed before you start to have the sexual act, to make sure that everyone's on board and there are no bad surprises there, I guess you could say.
Yeah, don't want those. We want good surprises.
That's right. And so people might want to have a conversation about things that they used to do in the beginning of their relationship that they thought were really erotic to them, or things that they've never done before that they fantasize about. And I know that when you work with your clients, you talk about fantasy a lot and you come up with a fantasy box that people can put their fantasies into. And I think that's a great idea. It's a great way to get the dialogue going.
And,
get the erotic juices flowing.
Exactly, and the creativity that's involved. So if I'm working with clients and they say, I don't fantasize, I don't have any fantasies, I'm like, okay, well, homework, figure out some fantasies, maybe watch the movies, read some books, do whatever to engage with it, your creativity, your eroticism. And I want you to create a box, and once a week, put a fantasy in the box, and then at the end of the month, sit together with your partner or your partners and explore what's in the box in a safe environment. It could be at a restaurant, fully dressed, not in the bedroom where it could be more vulnerable, and just start having the conversation to explore some of the fantasies that were in the box.
That's right.
And see what comes from it.
And some fantasies are fantasies that you might want to act out, and some fantasies are fantasies that you only want to talk about and fantasize about. And so that's something else that's important to discuss when you're talking about fantasy.
Yeah, exactly. Back to fantasies as well. It's important to also understand that if you do play this game, Fantasy Box, that you want to put boundaries around that. So if you only want to put fantasies in the box that you want to be able to act out, because you don't want anything in there that you won't be able to act out, then I think that that's really important to have those boundaries so that you're not pulling something out of the box. You're like, we're never going to be able to do this. And it's like, I know, but we can talk about it. But you just want to make sure you're on the same page with the fantasy box.
That's right, yeah. And so fantasies are a great way to help open your mind and expand your sexual repertoire.
Yeah, absolutely. How else can we expand our sexual repertoire, get up against our edges a bit more?
Yeah, and so another thing that I talk about with clients sometimes is when we're exploring what is erotic to them, we talk about different sorts of kink or fetish that maybe they're not interested in exploring all the way or delving into completely, but something that they want to touch on. And so a lot of people will end up enjoying something like tickling or being held down or a little bit of pain during sex, a little bit of spanking or something like that. And so that's something that might seem taboo to some people. And so between the couple or the intimate partnership, it's something that needs to be invited in and okay between the two of them. You know, it's okay with me if you have a sexual act that you want to try that's out of the ordinary. I want to hear it. I want to entertain it.
So I think the big takeaway here is open the lines of communication to get this thing going.
That's right.
To expand your sexual repertoire in the bedroom. That's amazing. We can contact Joe at the Sexology International website, and I'm so happy to have you.
Yeah.
And we'll be right back with more to talk about the sexual motivation cycle.
Well, I think it's a myth that kids are randomly dropped to your home, but really it's a partnership with your resource worker who knows you best. And because they know you and they know where your family dynamics are, they're placing kids that work best for you, whether that's age or gender or just your ability to care for them. And so it really works well and makes for a great placement.
Thursday.
We are Theater on the Edge, an improv group that's been performing here for the past 35 years.
Theater on the Edge on Rogers TV.
When it comes to fantasy baseball, smart decisions make winners. Join me, Gabriel Morency, on Game Time Decision as I break down the best bets, props, and fantasy plays from across the sports world. Watch Game Time Decisions live weekdays on the Fantasy Sports Network, the first and only channel for expert fantasy sports advice and analysis 24/7. Get Fantasy Sports Network with MLB Extra Innings as part of the Rogers Super Sports Pack. Order through your remote on channel 431.
The following program contains a topic which may not be suitable for young viewers. Viewer discretion is advised.
Up next, we have Joe here to talk to us about the sexual motivation cycle. So Dr. Rosemary Basson came up with this cycle called the female sexual response cycle, which is more secular, which is different from the original linear model by Masters and Johnson. And so we're also calling it the sexual motivation cycle because it's all-encompassing for all genders, right? So Joe, I know you love Dr. Rosemary Basson. She's your second favorite Canadian next to me.
Second favorite.
Second favorite. Can you tell us a little bit about her work?
Yeah, so Dr. Basson has done a lot of research on how females respond sexually. And so then that was translated into the sexual motivation cycle because it is fitting for a lot of different genders. It's more specific to the person than it is to the gender.
And I also just want to reiterate, we often review this model with clients in sex therapy all of the time as an educational tool. So I'm really happy that you're able to take us through this today.
Thank you. So the first thing that I want to talk about in the sexual motivation cycle is that Dr. Basson breaks down sexual response or sexual desire, excuse me. There's spontaneous sexual desire and there's responsive sexual desire. And so spontaneous sexual desire is something that happens a lot in the beginning of relationships, when people are just really falling in love and they want to have sex frequently. If it's a heterosexual couple, both the man and the woman want to have sex nearly equally. And so after some time, that dies off. And so then one person in the relationship might have the spontaneous desire where they see something, they smell something, they taste something, they hold their partner, and all of a sudden they feel aroused and they want to have sex. And so more commonly in long-term relationships, especially for females, but it also happens for males, is people have responsive sexual desire. And so with responsive sexual desire, people do have sexual desire, but it's a step back. And so that means that, well, then the sexual motivation cycle kicks in. And so responsive sexual desire is often noticed after one already feels aroused. So spontaneous desire is when you're feeling aroused and feeling like spontaneous desire just hits you, you want your partner, you're ready to go. And then responsive desire might involve a little bit more prep work where you're engaging in an experience with someone and then you might feel aroused and then you're responding to that, so hence responsive desire becomes present. That's right. And so the sexual motivation cycle is a good descriptor of how to get to responsive sexual desire. And so I have the diagram here. And so the sexual motivation cycle starts off with a willingness to find and be receptive to sex. And so in that moment, people go from a place of sexual neutrality, but they want to be intimate with their partner. They want to feel close to their partner. They want to have physical pleasure. And so they understand that if they are willing to engage in sex, they they might have that experience. And so they're not feeling desire yet, but they're willing to engage.
So I always give an analogy where, let's say your partner is saying, I want to go to this restaurant for this really good meal. I'm starving. I want to go to this restaurant. If you're not necessarily starving, but you could eat, sort of feeling neutral to it, you're like, I could eat. And then you might go to the restaurant with them.
So it's the willingness to engage.
The willingness to engage.
That's right. I like that. And so then the next point is the sexual stimuli with the appropriate context, okay? And so sexual stimuli is something that feels good sexually, that's going to help you feel turned on sexually. And so you need to know your body. You need to be able to tell your partner or your partners about your body so that you know how you can be turned on.
Right.
And within the appropriate context is really important. Some people don't want to have sex anywhere. Some people only want to have sex in their bed. Some people do feel more adventurous, want to have sex somewhere else. But you have to be in a context that you feel comfortable in, that you want to engage in sex in.
Yeah.
And so all the while, as you're going through this, you're processing, you're checking in with yourself. You can go through the sexual motivation cycle in your mind several times during the same act, so you can continue to choose to stay engaged.
Right.
And as much as you can choose to stay engaged, you can choose to disengage. You can choose to say, this isn't something that I actually am feeling interested in right now, and that's 100% okay.
Yeah.
And so as you're checking in with yourself, you're being mindful, you're checking in with your body, you're thinking, am I becoming aroused? Are my nipples becoming erect? Am I feeling flush? Am I starting to open my mouth when I'm breathing? Am I becoming aroused? Am I becoming excited? And so then after you do all the checking and you realize you're feeling aroused, after you realize you feel aroused becomes responsive desire, and then you feel desire to stay in the sex act, and you feel desire to have physical pleasure. And so from there, you either have non-sexual rewards, which is intimacy, or non-physical rewards from sex, or else you have sexual rewards, so you can have orgasm or just sexual pleasure, and that the whole experience feeds into your motivation to have sex the next time. If it's a positive experience, you're likely
It'll
to
feed into your next sexual experience.
That's right. That's right. To try to engage in sex again. If it's negative, then you can be more avoidant.
Right. Another thing I want to touch on as you're talking about this, though, is, as you said, you can choose to continue to engage, and then maybe responsive desire will present itself. But if at any time you want to disengage, that's completely okay. But really to establish a healthy relationship with your partner or partners where that's celebrated, right? Because a lot of times that can be a heavy piece of conflict where someone's like, oh, I'm just going to go to make them happy. I don't want to let them down. Or it could feel like a rejection to the partner at the same time. So really trying to take those personal hurt feelings out of that equation, and knowing that we're trying to engage in good sex here. Yeah.
Yeah, you're trying to bond. You're trying to build intimacy between the two of you. So you don't want to have sex to avoid negative reasons for not having sex. That's not a good reason to engage in sex.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was a good point.
Well, this has been awesome, Jo. Thank you for reviewing the female sexual response cycle and the sexual motivation cycle.
It has me really excited.
Oh, yeah. We'll have a lot of people out there very excited.
That's right.
So how can we get in touch with you?
You can find me on sexologyinternational.com.
And follow you on
Instagram,
Twitter, Facebook.
That's right, all of them. Just do it up.
And any final takeaways for our viewers at home?
Oh, I cannot talk about communication enough. If you communicate with your partner or your partners and you say, this is where I am, this is where I want to be, there's a good chance you can get there. Stay on the same page.
Stick around. We'll have more in a minute.